So I was watching a couple of your videos talking about, like failures and kind of looking at this idea that people mess up and like we're supposed to be experts. And I've always struggled with somebody figuring me out, right? This whole idea of like, I'm not the expert. Like, and working in the arena that I work in, I work with sex offenders and I work with people in crisis, and any mistake is somebody's life. Somebody's in the hospital, somebody's injured, somebody could be paralyzed, any of those things. And so when people look to me as an expert, they're like, hey, give us a solution. I'm waiting for that moment for somebody to find me out, right? I'm figuring out, like, because I feel like a kid. Like, I feel like this kid that just kind of fell into a lot of these opportunities. And I'm just waiting for that moment for somebody to say, like, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He shouldn't be here. And I'm going to be like, you're right. This last year has been really intense. I got to go and spend some time at the board and I'm here in Connecticut doing this conference and doing some really cool things that 10 years ago I was serving coffee in a coffee shop. And I don't know. I'm just waiting for somebody to figure it out. Like, I'm just waiting for somebody to be like, no, what's he doing? Like, who gave him this certificate? So that's kind of really what I've been thinking about that a lot lately.
I feel you in a few different ways.
Yeah.
My thoughts are like, is everyone an imposter in these fields? Is like every adult an imposter?
I feel like we all have that feeling, right? Like, there's got to be. I imagine that there are people that we look up to as mentors that feel the same way. I know the most humble people that I work with tend to have those feelings, and I imagine that it is a pretty common thing that we probably don't talk about a lot, but I've been seeing people talk about it more and more lately. People being really honest and authentic, and I think that's a really great culture to be around, right? That people are being humble and recognizing that, hey, maybe I don't know it all, and being a scientist. Because that's what we are. We're scientists. Being a scientist and recognizing that there's no finish line, I think is really cool. And I think that kind of bleeds into the idea of like being humble and recognizing that you don't know all the stuff. And I think that there is like some truth. There's definitely a grain of truth in that. And so I think it's great that people are starting to recognize it. But, it definitely, when somebody comes to me and they're like, hey, this kid's beating his head on the sidewalk, what do we do? I'm like, I don't know. What do we do? And then I worry, like, if I make the wrong decision, that's somebody's life. So that's when they're going to figure me out. I don't want to be found out on at the expense of somebody's life, or their health. And I think that's probably where a lot of my issue comes from.
Where does that leave us then as a culture?
I mean, I think it's important to recognize those small successes and recognize how you got there. Despite what I might not know, and recognizing that, maybe I'm not an expert on a lot of things. I'm continuing to grow. I'm continuing to become a better practitioner. I'm learning something new every day. I'm a lifelong learner. So I recognize that I'm kind of always getting closer to that end goal, but there is no real end goal. And I think more importantly, just being honest about it, because I think that we work in a tough field. I think that working with the individuals that we work with are really intense, and the problems that we deal with are really intense. And so, recognizing that there's no finish line, but taking the time to celebrate those small successes, I think is a big deal. I'm here in Connecticut and just kind of taking it all in. Like, I've never been to Connecticut. I never would have come to Connecticut. I'm standing on the Yale campus. Like, I was never the Yale kid. I graduated from the University of Phoenix. So, I got to take some time to celebrate that and recognize, like, hey, you know what? Whether I'm an imposter or not, I got here, and it's kind of a cool experience, and just kind of live in it for a bit.